Welcome to ForensicWeek.com. If you've been wondering where we've been for the last 18 minutes, we've been waiting for Google Plus to let us broadcast today. So those of you who've been waiting, I apologize for the inconvenience, but we're here. I'm your host, Tom Mauriello, coming to you from Laurel, Maryland, CEO of Forensic IQ Incorporated and professor at the University of Maryland, Department of Criminology and Criminal Justice. This is episode 26, a live rebroadcast of an earlier episode that we did on the subject that we're going to be speaking about this evening, but because of, again, other technical difficulties, the audio did not record. Today's topic for discussion is animal and agricultural forensic services as it relates to suspicious animal deaths, production abnormalities, and injuries. This is obviously a major concern on our country's farmlands like Iowa, where our guest comes from this evening. Viewers, ForensicWeek.com is a talk show that features real forensic science by real forensic scientists, and we certainly have just that for you today. Presented live on your desktop every Thursday evening, 7 to 8 p.m., right here, Eastern Standard Time on www.forensicweek.com. We are a proud member of the Hangout10.com live TV webcast network, which is a series of shows like this, recorded and broadcast live using Google Plus when it's working effectively, a social networking service. Before I begin this evening's discussion, like always, let's hear from the producer of ForensicWeek.com, Tim Fromm. Tim?
Thanks, Tom. If you have any questions or comments about the show or ideas for shows in the future, you can contact us at forensicweek@gmail.com, and we'll respond to your email, and we'll address it on a later show, something like that. If you're watching this show live right now and you have a question for Dr. Gary, feel free to comment right on YouTube as you're watching. I can pull it up here on the show and ask them live on the show. Also, make sure you find us on Facebook and like and share, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you get all the updates on our show and watch every show as they come on. Back to you, Tom.
Okay, Tim, thank you. We have two important notices that I want to mention before we introduce our guests. First of all, for our law enforcement viewers out there, tomorrow, if you don't know, is National Donut Day. So donut stores around the country, like Krispy Kreme, are giving out free donuts. I'm a donut connoisseur, even though I gave them up 2.5 years ago. For those of you who want to participate, tomorrow is Donut Day, so please visit your local donut shop around the country. Now, what's more important than that is the Supreme Court decision that came out this past Monday. As you know, several weeks ago we talked about the fact that U.S. Supreme Court was deciding on whether they're going to authorize post-arrest DNA collection. I am very happy to say that their ruling overturns Maryland's High Court decision. A divided U.S. Supreme Court ruled last Monday that police in Maryland and the 27 other states can continue the warrantless collection of DNA from people arrested for felonies, but not convicted of that same crime. The key is, these are people who are arrested for a felony. They in turn get found not guilty for that crime, but their DNA still can still go into the database. That's what the Supreme Court said. That's our law. The 5-4 decision upheld a state law that allows investigators to take genetic information from arrestees, a practice followed by the federal government in the 27 other states like Maryland. Police generally compare suspects' DNA to records from other cases in hopes of developing leads. Justice Anthony Kennedy, writing for the majority, said DNA collection, and listen to this, because you heard this several weeks ago here on ForensicWeek.com. DNA collection was a legitimate booking procedure akin to fingerprinting and photographing for the purposes of identifying suspects. So bottom line, the Supreme Court said the collection of DNA is no different than taking fingerprints or taking mugshots. In the dissent, that aligned some of the court's liberal members with conservative Justice Antonin Scalia. The minority said the judge's decision overextends police powers. Scalia quoted Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley and Attorney General Douglas Glenser describing DNA collection as a crime-fighting tool. I wouldn't argue that. Yeah, DNA collection is a crime-fighting tool, but it is first a means to identify individuals. Make no mistake about it, as an entirely predictable consequence of today's decision, this is what Scalia is saying, your DNA can be taken and entered into a national DNA database if you are ever arrested, rightly or wrongly, and for whatever reason. You're right, Justice Scalia. Thank you very much. Law enforcement is already authorized to handcuff suspects, pat them down, draw blood, strip search anyone before taking them to a jail cell, he said. Clearly, they can touch the inside of your cheek and take a DNA swab. And that's a statement from the Attorney General here in the state of Maryland. DNA testing has little to do with identification and everything to do with solving unresolved crimes, says Stephen Shapiro, the ACLU's National Legal Director. While no one disputes the importance of that interest, the Fourth Amendment has long been understood to mean that the police cannot search for evidence of a crime without individualized suspicion. Today's decision eliminates that crucial safeguard. I'm sorry, I don't agree. Again, it's a form of identification. It's no different than fingerprints. We're doing the same thing with fingerprints, and nobody has argued that. So 3 cheers for the Supreme Court for making a good decision, and I think that a lot of cases are going to be made for that and for the right reasons. Okay. There's my little thing for the Supreme Court. Tonight we'll be discussing a forensic topic that may sound a little unusual: animal and agricultural forensic services. Forensic science is an ever-growing field of study, and thanks to my membership in the American Academy of Forensic Science, I get to meet scientists from all over the world who dedicate their research and study in every conceivable form of investigation. Our guest today, a colleague and a dear friend, Dr. Gary Pusillo, coming to us from Marshalltown, Iowa. Gary is the owner and president of NT Service Corporation, providing investigative forensic and expert witness services for claims and litigated cases involving animal deaths, production abnormalities, and injuries. Dr. Pusillo has a PhD in animal nutrition from, of course, Iowa State University. He's a former consultant and animal feed formulator for Disney's Animal Kingdom and Ringling Brothers Circus, a consultant for major farms and animal nutrition and health companies in Brazil and Argentina, providing veterinarian and nutrition services. Accepted as an expert witness by federal courts to provide testimony on veterinarian and nutritional issues. Those veterinarian and nutritional issues that you'll learn about this evening. This past February, Gary received the American Academy of Forensic Sciences General Section Achievement Award for the work he has done in this area of expertise. And with all those things, he's also an ordained permanent deacon in the Roman Catholic Church and has been since 2003. Gary, I want to thank you so much. I know you're a busy guy. You've had all kinds of crazy weather out there in Iowa, and the fact that you've cut out this time for us is greatly appreciated. How are you doing this evening?
Oh, I would only do it for you, Tom.
Well, thank you very much, and you're doing it for more than me, but we have a lot of listeners out there that are interested in forensic science, all aspects of forensic science, and they want to learn the truth and what real forensic science is all about. And this evening they're going to hear from you about an area that one might not always associate with forensic science. So let me start off, and again, listeners, we actually did this show back in April 18th, and Gary and I had a great time, a lot of laughs, a lot of interesting content, and we're going to try to recreate that as best as we can. I want to start off, Gary, by saying when we associate the word forensic to any science, there's a connotation of some sort of a problem that exists. So animals, agriculture, nutrition in animals, how does forensic science get involved in this whole thing? Tell us how you started and the kind of cases that you're working.
Well, I started actually with horse cases in New Jersey where people were found to be killing their horses for insurance money. And it was very interesting to track what was going on in the industry. These were standardbred racehorses, and a lot of them were highly insured. And I was investigating the occurrences of death, what was the circumstances around the deaths, and if they were actually caused by accident or deliberate. So we have actually horse murders going on.
All right. If that was a human being, then we'd call the medical examiner. So who are you representing back then, and how did you get called in to do, in other words, who questioned the validity of the death or the circumstances to call someone like you in?
Well, it started out with some insurance companies, but it was also, we have the Organized Crime Bureau that was pretty much had a place on the racetracks. And one of the men who was looking at these deaths asked me to get involved, and so I kind of went undercover around the farms because I was going on these farms on a regular basis with my job, helping these racehorses. So that's how it got started. And it wound up being a very large case in the East Coast on, they call it the killing fields for the horses. And that's how I got really interested and started in forensics.
Now, are there a lot of people, forensic scientists, that do exactly what you do? Or are you traveling all over the country as a one-person show?
Well, Dr. Dick Houston out of Minnesota has been doing this probably 40 years, and I've been doing it about 28 years full-time. And so I would say that there's two of us who do this on a regular basis, plus I'm training another gentleman. He's been training with me since July. He's from Mongolia, and he's really doing a really bang-up job learning the ropes, mentoring program.
Okay, you mentioned that one of your first cases were a racehorse where people for the insurance money actually, how did they kill them? Did they break their leg? Tell us what happened and how the evidence was uncovered to show or prove what happened.
Well, to me, there was an awful lot of electrocutions going on, and that's highly unusual when you have well-managed herds of horses. And what would happen was they would dump some water in the bottom of a pen, and there would be a hanging light, a bulb light, and the light would be broken and just hung there low enough so that the horse could eventually contact the electric and electrocute itself. That was very common. Another one was putting bags over their head and suffocating the horses, and they would stick in lots of feed in the back of the throat to make it look like the horse choked to death. Well, there's a lot of things that didn't work out. When you cover a horse's head, it'll die from lack of air, but when you start looking into the epiglottis and the soft palate and so forth, it wasn't showing up as a choke. These horses were, that's how I determined that they were becoming suffocated.
And these were the owners of the horses were doing this?
Well, the owners would bring them to a specific farm, and they call it the killing farm. And one gentleman provided services for killing horses in various ways.
You're kidding.
No, that's what, and there's a certain number of farms that would have that kind of services available.
Now, did anybody get charged criminally on these cases?
Yes. Yes, they did.
Now, how long ago was this?
It was in the 80s.
In the 80s. Okay, so it's been a long time now. Is this still prevalent? Is this still happening?
Well, there's still a lot of horses being, I would say, killed or injured for insurance money. I had a very large case, well, not recently, a couple of years ago, with draft horses. And that was an extremely interesting case because, and for a lot of people who don't know horse agriculture, a lot of them are raised and urine lines. These draft horses are very large creatures. I have Percherons, and they're about 2,000 plus pounds. And a lot of these horses are raised for urine. They actually harvest the urine, and they make birth control pills out of the urine.
You kidding?
No. And so
horses raised for the urine.
Right, they're pregnant mares, and they raise them specifically for the urine, and they make them pee a lot. There's special rations to make them pee a lot.
You're hearing this first on ForensicWeek.com with Dr. Gary Pusillo. Continue, Gary.
No, but I'm not getting it. And they have these large barns just full of mares, pregnant mares, and all the mares do each day is eat and make enough pee so they can make these birth control pills out of the hormones that are in this pee. But what was happening is they started cutting down on the use of mare pee for birth control pills. So all these horses started to be coming onto the market, and certain people started to take them into the United States and try to make a fast dollar on them and try to attach some really good credentials to these horses on their farms. And I got involved in some of that and investigating some. One of the farmers was saying that he's owed almost $1 million for bad feed because these horses weren't producing properly. They weren't growing properly. They had a lot of bad feet and legs. And so I got involved in that case. And the guy was actually bringing in these mares that were essentially just raised for urine, put them in on a farm in Wisconsin, and saying that he bred these horses and that the feed was making them really unusable, and he wanted to collect insurance money. The long story short was he only had one potential horse that could even breed on a farm, and it was very difficult for this horse to even move, and let alone breed a mare. So it started to put the pieces together to see where these what actually was going on in his farm, and he lost a lot of time. Let's put it that way. He got in big trouble.
So most of these, I assume that these cases come to you via the insurance companies. Is that correct?
Insurance companies, feed companies. There's a lot of people who know what we do for a service, and most of the time it's a large corporation that is falsely accused of, or they don't know yet, of what is actually causing the death of these animals or production problems, and then I get involved.
Do the police ever get involved in any of these cases?
Well, yeah, the police do get involved in some of the cases, but I usually stay out of that aspect of it. You know, they get an active case from me, they see what's going on, and they take it from there. I don't handle the criminal end of it. Okay.
All right. So tell us, who are your clients, customers, patients, whatever you want to call them, from your company that bring you into these things, and under what circumstances?
Well, let's say like a large feed company like Land O'Lakes. Everybody knows the butter people. Well, they sell a lot of feed. They sell a lot of different products throughout the United States. And for example, if there was a crazy case, one of their cooperatives down in the South was accused of killing off quail, and it was a quail farm. And some of these quail farms are very large. And this particular quail farm was very funny to me because it was a quail farm that was being used to raise quail to get shot. They would have hunting parties come down and shoot these quail. And so the first time I showed up on the farm, the lady approached me and she started crying, "My babies, my babies, my babies, you're killing off my babies." And I'm going, "Lady, you're raising these to die anyway." But and that's so it was all about her babies, and she got heart attacks because of all the problems associated with her babies dying. And Land O'Lakes was supposed to pay a large sum of money, like $14 million in this particular case.
In this one
case? A lot of debt. $14 million in this particular case. They were being, that's what they were looking for in return. And it turned out that the lady got nothing in the long run.
And how is that?
Well, she had a very large disease problem on the farm. She had gastroenteritis going through these birds and killing them. She had rats and mice transferring a lot of diseases, very poor care, a lot of heat stress, a lot of environmental stresses that, see, when we do a forensic investigation, we try to recreate, just like you guys do, recreate the scene. And so we have to recreate the scene with a lot of different records. We use weather records, USDA records, veterinary records, and what I do is I also sample the soils and try to find different types of microorganisms in the soils. I test water, I test feed, I test, you name it, we test it and try to recreate exactly what happened. And if we're lucky, we even have some birds that might have been dead on the farm still, and we could use those birds to, do autopsies just like you guys do. So we do just about everything you guys do, except we got to do it with all different kinds of species. We're dealing with every kind of species, from birds to lizards to cows to horses, you name it.
Okay, so if an insurance company has a claim against them, they might come to you in your company and ask for you to do an examination. What if the people in question don't want you to be involved? What legal authority do you have to conduct your investigation?
We work with attorneys that will get us the right subpoenas. A lot of times I have to get subpoenas to go on a farm, and what we have made up, our company has made up a large checklist of things that we will demand to see while we're on the farm. So we have, we have rights to get on the farm. We have everything documented. We have legal subpoenas. We even have court orders sometimes to go on the farm and to have the right kind of evidence collected.
Wow. So what legal authorities or organizations do you communicate with? Are they state-level agencies that are working with the insurance attorneys and to get all these subpoenas and everything else? Who's doing all that?
Yeah, we have, again, I've been involved in some federal cases also, especially when we're dealing with our food supply. And that's really critical. A lot of times the federal government will get involved if it's across states, like if we have a dairy problem or there's a problem with perhaps tainted milk or something in the milk that shouldn't be in there. That becomes a federal case because it's going across state lines, and I don't get involved in doing the legal work for, I help the attorneys get what they want, and I'll assist the attorneys from my experience, but I let the attorneys handle it their way.
Now, the case that you mentioned with the quail, are you the one that found the reason for those quails dying?
Well, that's an interesting process we go through. I will gather a lot of the information and do all the farm testing and so forth. Their career being developed, this investigative approach. Instead of just treating animals, we're actually investigating perhaps deaths or tainting of our food supply. So it's like a mentoring program for them.
Okay, so there's two of you full-time. You're mentoring a person. You got some universities who are dabbling in this. I got to believe that you're only hitting a minute part of the problem. Yes? No?
Oh, the problem is huge. We've been mistakenly handling these problems by using local veterinarians for forensic investigators, and they're not trained as a forensic investigator. They are trained as a veterinarian, and that's a problem. It's preservation of materials that are really crucial to the case. one thing that I really emphasize, but if I have work with local veterinarians, is take pictures, document. They don't even typically your local veterinarian gets involved and doesn't even take notes. They try to do it from memory. And the simple things need to be taught in colleges on how to take data and how to preserve data.
You know, I didn't mention this at the beginning, but I've been working on a murder case the last couple of months, and it just finished last week. I worked for the defense, and our client was found not guilty, and it was a you know, an unattended death. You know, that ultimately the wife gets arrested for overdosing the husband. You know, and the police never established a crime scene. They went in there, thought it was a natural cause death, so they didn't take pictures. They didn't collect all the medications in the house and put them on chain of custody forms. There were no chain of custody documents. They transported the medications in the body bag, and the person who transported the body didn't even know the medication was in the body bag. And it just goes on and on and on. Now, you know, whether this person was involved in the demise of her spouse's death or not wasn't even the issue anymore. It was the fact that nothing was done, nothing was recorded, nothing was reported properly, the crime scene and the evidence didn't exist, you know, and couldn't be introduced.
Tom, that's one of the biggest problems we have in the animal industry is we have feed tests. Okay, everybody takes these feed tests, and they think they're valid feed tests. And I've got a couple cases going right now. We've got quite a few feed tests. None of them have been documented for chain of custody.
What do you mean by a feed test? What do you mean by a feed test?
Well, for example, if we have a problem with, let's say, a large number of pigs, 100,000, 200,000 pigs are having a problem. So there's feed tests that are required to be taken in these feed companies, but nobody has been documenting them or properly taking care of these feed samples. Everybody needs to take feed samples when they make a certain number of batches of feed. That's required by law. But the documentation and the preservation of these samples is horrible. And then when there's a case, they send in feed samples without proper identification or chain of custody. So, for example, you get this a laboratory analysis back, and it says feed, and it gives you an analysis. No ID number, nothing. So it could be anybody's feed. And so you go into court with this kind of data. It's ridiculous.
And how do they establish the nexus between what they present, the feed they present, versus the feed that may have caused the deaths of the animals or the sicknesses? I mean,
well, a lot of times they try to just do it by testimony, their experts' testimony, but they have really no chain of custody, no documentation, and they just rely on an expert's testimony that wasn't even there, that wasn't even part of the testing process.
You mentioned last time we talked in April that you were working a case where you actually did autopsies on like 350 pigs or hogs or something. Tell us a little bit about that.
That's an active case. Yeah, that's an active case right now.
Okay, I didn't realize it was still active.
You know, we could talk about the generalities of it.
Okay.
The local veterinarian took hand-selected 3 pigs out of over 1,000 pigs and did a necropsy on them, and I wouldn't accept that as evidence because they hand-selected 3 pigs for a specific condition. And so I did over 300 plus, along with a USDA inspector.
Had they already died?
What we do, we try to... No, we had them in a slaughterhouse. We did it in a slaughterhouse, so it was controlled conditions.
Okay. And
you can't do that with people. We could do that with...
Yeah, yeah. You're right. You're absolutely right. Okay, so that case, and so is the common denominator the feed in that, or is it environmental, or again?
We have a very interesting problem in Northwest Iowa and a lot of the Midwest. There's a lot of cases that are very similar but with all different feeds involved. So when you see a similar case with all different feeds involved, you start looking for other than feed problems. So that's the gist of the case right now.
How about the feed coming from outside of the United States, like China, etc.? I've read that there's been problems with animal food and grain coming from other countries that are tainted or whatever. Have you experienced any of that?
My biggest problem with a lot of the food coming in from other countries right now is pet foods. I would not ever recommend to any of my clients to buy from certain countries because some of the pet food that's coming into the United States, here's where we get involved with DNA testing. You know, you guys do DNA, we do DNA testing. We do DNA testing to see what type of proteins are actually coming in these pet foods. So you'll find DNA from dogs into dog food. We'll find DNA from cats into dog food. We find DNA from rats, and we find DNA from raccoon dogs, and that's a big problem from China. They slaughter raccoon dogs for the fur, and they put the meat into pet foods that we're getting into a lot of our pets. And
what's a raccoon?
A lot of
What's a
raccoon dog? Looks like a raccoon dog. What can I tell you? It's a raccoon dog.
Okay.
What do you think, Tom? Why do they call it a raccoon dog?
Okay.
It's a very descriptive term.
All right. Okay.
But they use it like artificial fur. You know, I'm not artificial. Real fur around the collars of. It looks like a coyote or something like that. And a lot of the stores use that around the wintertime. They have around the collars. It's from raccoon dogs in China.
Now,
but they put the meat back in pet foods.
Pet food is not regulated by the government, right?
Well, pet food is regulated, but it's not regularly tested. A lot of it gets by. We have a large problem in the United States right now with pig ears and pig snouts coming in from China and Indonesia. A lot of our dogs are getting salmonella, and of course, you know, the local veterinarian typically will say, well, you got gastrointestinal problems. Yes, you picked up salmonella. But they don't do the DNA sequencing sometimes to find out where the source of that salmonella came from. And, you know, is it Heidelberg? Is it Trifamurium? They just say, well, you got gastrointestinal problems, and we'll leave it at that. But what the problem is, Tom, is that these pig ears from some countries, these dogs are getting salmonella, but they're also dragging these pig ears around in the house, and now the kids are getting sick, and now the family's getting sick. So it becomes a big problem. And
I don't let pet ears in my
pig ears.
Pig ears in my house.
Well, hey Tom, you want to hear a good one? You ever hear of pizzle? Okay, you ever hear of pizzle sticks?
Pizzle sticks? You mean the candy things?
Yeah. You know what a pizzle stick is?
Yeah.
What? A pizzle stick is is the penis from a bull.
What?
And they're selling them in stores for dog chews. Hundreds of thousands of them are being sold throughout the United States, these pizzle sticks. And they are just, some of them are just loaded with all kinds of bacteria.
Oh my God.
And this is dragging around houses. And little kids are crawling on the floor touching this stuff.
Okay. Your background was in animal...
Can I interject?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just looked up pizzle stick, and the first thing I saw was pizzle is an old English word for penis. So,
okay.
It should be obvious.
I thought a pizzle stick was some kind of a candy thing that had sugar candy in there. Okay, never mind.
It's a pixie stick.
Oh, that's
not a pizzle stick.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, all right, Gary. All right, so when you're in college, all the way to your PhD, you're studying animal nutrition, veterinarian science, etc., and somehow you got involved in this forensic area for obvious reasons. And you got one other person who's doing it, and you're training a third. What can you, or the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, what needs to be done to get to get people engaged, to realize this is important. There are plenty of people who are studying veterinarian science, etc., who might be looking for a specific area like this. So what does someone do who might be interested in this study and research?
But there are some wildlife investigators. They do a really good job, and that's a special kind of, I guess you would call it forensics, you know, to identify what wildlife was killed and so forth. I'm looking at production agriculture. I'm looking at what I call the tip of the spear. We're the people who need to be out in the field, and I would think that people who are looking into going into forensic animal research, you don't need to be a veterinarian. You need to have, and actually, Tom, I told you this last time, you got to be creative. I love the artists, the people who are really artistic. They think out of the box. They become the best investigators in the forensic world that I deal in, because you're dealing with all kinds of situations, environment, food, medicines, you name it, we're dealing with it. So you got to be creative in your thinking. You can't be narrow-minded. And I would really look into people who want to serve the agriculture world by looking into coursework at their local college and see if they're offering, you know, forensics for one, but then get involved with, you know, the higher degrees of education like I did. You know, I took every course that was offered at Iowa State that had to deal with animals. So it took me, my wife just laughed at me, it took me 10 years in college to get all my degrees, but now it's helpful. You need a broad-based background. You need to be creative. You need to have a high sense of biochemistry and you know, the basic sciences. That's what I recommend. Look into getting colleges interested in this. Okay.
So if we have viewers who are in high school, or freshman and sophomore, and they're interested in animal husbandry, what is that in relation to animal science? Is that the same thing, or?
Animal husbandry is just basically all we do to make sure the animals have the ability to reach their genetic potential. So that means you got the proper environment, you got the proper food, you got the proper care, anything that's involved with taking care of that specific species, but also for the specific purpose that they're, you know, if you're raising chickens for eggs, well, that's a different way of raising chickens than you're raising chickens for, you know, broilers, you know, to chew on and to eat.
Okay. So as a deacon who specializes in animal husbandry, you're not out there marrying little like pigs and stuff?
That's pretty interesting. I would never consider. No, I don't do
little farm weddings.
No farm weddings.
Oh, okay.
I'm a Catholic deacon now. That's different now. We're very strict.
Okay. Let me kind of move on. You wrote an article, and then I'm reading this. Animal nutrition investigative techniques essential to obtaining investigative forensic information from multiple sites. What are these investigative techniques that you talk about in this article?
Well, that was an interesting case because it involved alpacas. And for anybody who's ever dealt with the world of llamas and alpacas, the alpaca is a smaller animal that has really unique, very beautiful hair. And we had some problems all across the Midwest. Well, it was Ohio area mainly, multiple sites. So what I wanted to do was develop techniques that can identify specifics on each site, what types of samples to take, keep it all involved so that we could have statistics involved. And that's one of the things that I love to do is I involve statistical analysis, you know, sample taking, statistical analysis, specific techniques for checklists. So everything's universal among every site. You develop a checklist. This has never been done in the animal industry. We just kind of go out on the farms and haphazardly look at these animals. But now you have a checklist and what to do and what evidence to take, how to take the evidence, and how to preserve the evidence. Different equipment that we modify from the human world to use in the animal world. And so this has to be brought together, just like when you do your human forensics. We bring this all together and try to come together with some way of analyzing this from multiple sites. And that's the essence of what we did in this case.
Establishing standards are so very important because when the opposition is looking at, an argument against your, whatever allegations you're making, they're looking to see what you did and what you didn't do. So I know one of the things I do all the time when I'm testifying is, okay, what are the standards? What is suggested that needs to be done? What did they do versus what they didn't do? And maybe what they didn't do wasn't necessary, but again, if you stay with the standards and you do it each time, you'll never be be questioned for it. And having standards will ensure consistency in how it's investigated. They did it back in 1997, 98. The federal government created national standards for crime scene investigation and death investigation. And those standards are still very valid today, because I used both of them in this case that I just finished a couple of weeks ago. And we just went down and identified everything that they didn't do and said, okay, why didn't you do this? Well, and they don't know what to say at that point,
Well, Tom, that's exactly why this show is so important. I'm trying to bring what I've learned to the masses so people could use my information, look at my published data, apply that in the future, because we've got some high school kids out there that are absolutely brilliant kids. We need them in our society, but we're not getting them led into the right areas because most of the times teachers don't know these fields exist. There's not too many people to know that what I do. For example, the article that was written about me in our local paper after I got this big award, it goes through and says everything. So my youngest daughter, who's in law school right now, by the way, she calls up and she goes, "Dad, you know what? Nobody understands what you're doing." She goes, "Still, we don't understand what you're doing." And she's in law school. She wants to be a forensic psychologist, and she's taken law, and she's also got her psychology degree. But she helps me out a lot with my data. She's a real good data person. We've got a lot of young people that are just looking for a science they could identify with.
Correct.
And what I tell people, if they want to get in this field, is do not let the books interfere with your education.
That's right. That's right.
Interfere with your education.
Well, one of the benefits, and I thank you for the kind words about the show, but what we do with these shows, because as you know, as soon as the show is done, it gets archived, hopefully with the audio, and then what we do is we go out and we tell the teachers. For example, in 2 weeks, we're running a workshop for high school teachers that teach forensic science. Now, these are chemistry and biology teachers who got told, oh, by the way, starting in the fall, you're teaching a forensics course. And they know nothing about forensics because they're chemistry and biology majors. So their job is not only to teach them something about forensics, but to engage their students to understand the subjects and what's available to them to broaden their horizons for the future. So this show, which will be on the archive, will always be there. So in my job is to make sure that they know it's out there. So when they want to know a little bit more about, maybe they have a student who's interested in animals and veterinarian science, everything else, but they also are interested in forensics. Well, here's a perfect opportunity. And they're going to watch the show to learn more. So I've got teachers from all over the country that are sending me emails and say, hey, thank you. I use show episode 5 and 25 and 30, whatever, because one, I didn't have the knowledge, and two, I wanted to expose my students with that information. So thank you for doing that. So hopefully we're going to have to work hard at getting this show out to those areas. In fact, we have University of Maryland started out to be an agricultural college in the turn of the 20th century. So we have a large animal science department. I know nothing about it, but maybe I need to make a contact over there and give them an opportunity to see the show, and maybe we can engage something, and have us. I can help with the forensic part of it, So, very good. Any other? I remember the last time we talked, you were talking about how over the years you've allowed various type animals into your home as that you were nursing back to health, but they ended up being house pets for a while. Tell us, what kind of animals were they again?
Yeah, it's funny. My daughters would go to school. My son didn't brag as much, but my daughters would go to school and say, "Yeah, well, I slept with a tiger last night, or a cougar, or a lion," and we would nurse these animals. We have a permit to go ahead and have these animals and nurse them back for some other facilities that need some extra care. And we call it, well, we're neonatal experts. We know how to feed these animals and get them back together. And it's so fun having a tiger in the house, but not when they're big. I do not recommend big tigers. My wife has a rule: when it starts dragging the couch around, it's out. So,
well, seriously, how do you know when it's time to make the tiger leave?
When they make big tiger noises and they start stalking you from underneath the couch, and they're biting for a reason.
But seriously, I mean, aren't you concerned that they might turn quickly?
Oh yeah, that's why we don't let them stay very long. It's just when they're neonates, we get them to a manageable size, that they're on their own, healthy, and we get them out. I do not recommend having wild animals in the house. No.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
We've had bears, we've had leopards, a pair of cougars was real fun. We have servals, which is an African cat that's about like a mini cheetah. We have had caracals, lemurs, regular Noah's Ark. In Iowa, we really need Noah's Ark right now because we're floating.
Oh, goodness. Is the rain stopped?
Yeah, for the last, I would say 6 hours, we have had no rain.
No, that's good. Well, Gary, tell us, okay, where are you hoping this whole field goes in the near future? And do you see anything that's happening at governmental levels or even private industry levels that is making a difference, so you and the two other folks that are engaged in this aren't run ragged all over the country?
Well, I think the government has a really good handle on a lot of the safety issues. What they don't have a good handle on is making sure things don't happen, the prevention. They don't have enough people out in the field. And what I'm concerned about is these very large corporations that are moving into the United States. For example, China just bought out, I believe, Smithfield Foods and all their hog operations. So they're going to be managed by a whole different type of criteria. And it worries me, the type of things that are being used in our food supply. And I hope that there's enough of people, and especially in our forensic community, that will get together and try to develop standards that can be followed in court systems throughout the country, and give us a way of looking at and controlling some of the practices that are being done in the agriculture industry. You've probably heard about the egg recall in Iowa, millions and millions of eggs that were recalled. I happened to investigate that same person a few years before that, and we reported this to the government officials, and they never shut him down. And he wound up getting a lot of people sick. The government never shut him down. So there's a lot of problems associated with uniformity in our field. We need to unify. We need to have colleges and universities teach how to properly investigate, how to properly prevent, and how to properly prepare veterinary students or other professionals for this field. Well, it's just haphazard. Universities
would be glad to do that if you show them that there's a need in a market for it. And it sounds like private industry are the ones that are going to have to make the loud noise. private industry being the the owners of these companies, and in the insurance companies, they need to get to the universities and say, hey, look, this is an important need, because somebody has to hire them. Say, so who do you see hiring these people if they in fact engage in this field of study?
I want to go back a step, and I think the reason a lot of private industry is not I don't think a lot of it's getting done properly because they're doing things the old-fashioned way. It's like the candle still works, right? It's a great source of light, but they haven't gotten to the light bulb yet. And what I mean by that is just filling out the sheets for submission of dead animals. It's a very big problematic area in our country. When you submit these sheets to get veterinary assistance to do an autopsy to see what's going on, some of these sheets are just atrocious, and unfortunately private industry has been relying on the local veterinarian to do this, and they think they have the right training. And I'm not picking on the veterinarian, I'm picking on the schools that haven't prepared these vets to properly write even simple forms. I had a case, they didn't even put down the sex of the animal that they were dealing with. No sex of the animal was on there. I have cases where they don't even put the history. And it's very, very disturbing. I think we have to go back to basics, Tom, and convince private industry that there's other professionals out there that they could hire to help, and not burden the veterinarian, who has a whole different set of talents. You know, the veterinarians are different. You know, we don't hire medical doctors to go and do what you do, Tom. You know, we have forensic scientists that do that. And then the medical departments, they back us up. You know, we have to portray to the public that this is a whole new area. Our country is bringing in all kinds of food from all over the world, and we need to have different people on the ground protecting our food supply.
Very good, very good. I was just thinking of something. I don't feel. I hope this isn't changing the subject, but mad cow disease. We hear the general public hears that all the time. Nobody knows what the heck it is. And have you been involved in any of those investigations?
Yes, I have, and quite a few years ago, I actually did a public television interview, a rather long one, and it was never aired for some reason. But then 2020 investigated also, and I was interviewed for that, and they did use some of that with Dr. Mike Hansen on some 2020 show about mad cow disease, because there are actually people who died from mad cow disease in the United States that was never reported to the general public. I happened to be in the house of one in Florida. The lady died, and they came in with biohazard suits. They put her in a biohazard bag. They incinerated her body and then put her into a lye solution and buried her as toxic waste.
No autopsy done?
Well, yeah, they did an autopsy, but they
okay.
They said it was mad cow disease, but it never got out to the public.
Okay.
And mad cow disease, it comes about by eating neurological tissue in cattle. It also we call it chronic wasting disease in some other species, but obviously mad cow disease is in bovine species. Here is the problem, Tom. Here's where science comes in. Sometimes you test the wrong area of the brain, you won't see it. And so a lot of times it goes unnoticed. And there are some cases in the United States where they thought it was mad cow disease, but they just didn't test the right side of the brain. I'm not a mad cow expert. I just got involved in it when it was really hot and heavy. And the problems also were because we were getting in some tissues from other countries that were improperly processed and getting a lot of these same tissues that could cause problems in cattle. And so what happened in the United States is now we cannot feed meat and bone meal from cows or steers back to other back to the parent source. We can't do that. That's prevented by law. So we made a step in the right direction. But we've got a problem in deer in our country, a chronic wasting disease. That's very similar to mad cow disease. And so hunters are actually getting sick from eating the meat of the deer.
Huh. when you've testified as an expert in a court, in a criminal court or a civil court, what have you been certified as an expert in? Is it a very specific area or general or what?
Most of the time I will testify as a nutritionist and in veterinary science. So they're related, veterinary science, nutrition, and animal husbandry. So it's the whole gamut of really what makes an animal run, you know, the health, the welfare, and the nutrition. And so that's typically what I do testify on most of the time.
Okay, very good. I'm going to stop for 1 second and remind, remind everybody that they're listening to ForensicWeek.com, and we have Dr. Gary Pusillo, a forensic animal nutritionist and veterinary science expert, who's been talking to us for almost 50 minutes or so. Before we close the show, I do want to mention that next week, June 13th, episode 27, we will be talking about forensic hypnosis. I am a certified forensic hypnotist, and I have a colleague coming to the show as our guest, Dr. Arnett Gaston, clinical psychologist. He has been on the show before, and he has used forensic hypnosis, as for victims and witnesses of crime who have experienced a traumatic event, and hypnosis has helped them to regain memory information that had been lost. So that'll be next week, June 13th. The following week, June 20th, we have retired Maryland State Trooper Lieutenant David Rockenbach, who was the operations commander of the Criminal Investigation and Intelligence Division back in 2002. 2002 was the year of the Washington sniper case, where in a 2.5-week period we had a number of people in the Washington, Baltimore area shot, killed by 2 snipers. Trooper Reichenbach was actually one of the troopers who had the opportunity to pull the 2 suspects out of the car on the interstate when they were found by a trucker. He's going to talk to us a little bit about the evidence, the investigation, and how they ultimately were able to arrest the 2 individuals and ultimately got convictions of both. One has been executed already. On June 27th, we have Joseph Giacalone, who is an adjunct professor at John Jay College and the author of Criminal Investigative Function, a guide for new investigators. Joe is a retired New York City detective sergeant who has had many positions in his 20-plus years with NYPD. His area of expertise is in cold case and homicide investigation. So we're going to ask Joe to come in on the 27th and kind of focus on, we hear about cold cases. At what point does a case become a cold case? And at what point does a law enforcement agency decide that there's enough possibilities to bring that case back up and follow leads to ultimately get a solution to that case? So I've talked to Joe, met him, and look forward to having him on June 27th. Gary, I think we did it this time. I really believe that this show has properly been recorded with audio, etc. I want to thank Tim. Tim was the one running around with Jim Alt to try to figure out why we weren't able to go on broadcast for whatever technical reasons, but it happened. And for those of you who are listening and say, hey, it's 8:16, why is Forensic Week still going on? Is because I know it's 7:16 in your area of the world, Gary. It's because we started late because of some technical issues, but we didn't let that stop us. We've done a full hour. Gary, I truly, truly appreciate what you've done here again this evening. Am I going to see you in Seattle next February, I hope?
I plan on presenting a paper, but I haven't got the abstract done yet.
Okay, well, I'd like to say that the next time I'm in Iowa, I'll stop by and say hello, but there's a difficult chance of that ever happening. But if you're ever in the Washington area, please make sure you look us up. And I want to thank you very much for being here. Any last words of wisdom before we sign off?
Think out of the box and keep on struggling with your dreams, because you're the only one that's going to make them come true.
Thank you, Gary. And I hope that you've touched some viewers tonight who are saying, hey, that's something I want to do. And ladies and gentlemen, if you are interested in learning more about this subject and you'd like to maybe email Dr. Pusillo, all you have to do is send us an email to forensicweek.com or forensicweek@gmail.com, and we'll make sure Gary gets that. We'll make sure that communication gets together. ForensicWeek.com is being brought to you through the cooperation of the Hangout10.com live TV show network. We recommend that you go to the Hangout10.com website and see the other scheduled shows just like this available for you to learn and be entertained. Meanwhile, tell your friends and colleagues to tune in and watch ForensicWeek.com every Thursday evening, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Or, like always, you can view any of our archive shows, just like this one this evening, at your convenience by simply going to ForensicWeek.com and clicking on the show of your interest. I thank you for watching this evening. Have a safe day and week. I'll be in California tomorrow. I'm flying to California. Going to be speaking to the California Association of Licensed Investigators, the largest association of private investigators in the world. And I'll be talking to them about one, polygraph and the use of the polygraph as a screening device, and also my presentation on critical thinking for investigators. So I look forward to being out there near my favorite city, San Francisco. So thank you very much. Have a good week, and thank you for watching.